Hello, and welcome back to Lunchtime BABLing. My name is Shea Brown. I'm the CEO of BABL AI, a company that audits algorithms for bias, ethical risk, and effective governance. I'm joined by a special guest, Ezra Schwartz. Ezra, thank you so much for coming. And for a little context, Ezra was a student and is now a graduate of our AI and algorithm auditor certification program. But we've had such fun conversations in the process of our office hours and the Q&A that I invited Ezra to come on and chat with us, because I think a lot of what the kind of perspective you bring to this emerging field is really unique and interesting. And so thank you so much for coming. And would you mind introducing yourself and your background to everybody?
Sure. First, Shay, thanks for inviting me. A real pleasure to be here and to be on this podcast, which I've been listening to for many, many months. And that's how I came to learn about BABL. So my name is Ezra Schwartz. I'm based in Chicago. And I am a UX consultant. I specialize in consulting in a domain that's called AgeTech, which is software services for the aging population. And I got interested in responsible AI maybe before I even knew something like that exactly existed. And the reason I got interested is that user experience, UX, an area that I've been practicing for over 25 years, is really about people or connecting people to systems. It can be user interfaces, digital, it can be products, devices, but it is really this creating the link between humans, users, and what they use, helping them accomplish the goal they want to accomplish. And so user experience as a methodology, as a practice, and as a way of thinking is really human-centered. And a lot of it has to do with doing the right thing, being ethical, talking with people, understanding what they really need versus what whoever wants to do the product wants, and just making the connection. So in starting to listening to the BABL podcasts and other resources, it started to really resonate with me as something that is really important, at least for me, to learn more about, because it really connects to what I do in UX every day.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's fascinating how important this is, right? Like, I think when we're talking about managing these AI systems, at the end of the day, they are systems that are interacting with people, and it makes sense that UX is a really key component of that. In fact, I've had conversations on other podcasts. A friend of mine, Paul, who's a researcher in UX, and in particular in the responsible AI kind of intersection. And I know he always emphasized that this is like a missing piece that people really haven't dug into that. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what that experience is like, because I think a lot of people have a misconception about what it is that UX, and often conflated with UI design. I think that's what a lot of people think. Oh, it's just designing the user interface for something. Tell us a little bit more about what that actually looks like, and why that it's not just that.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Um, sure. And I think what I'm going to talk about would be my coming from my approach to this. I mean, there may be other definition or explanations, but I think generally it is accepted, but there's some confusion. So maybe I'll start by actually talking some definitions, just so people understand. So you can think about user experience. So what is actually user experience? It's really how someone feels about a brand, a product, or maybe a service. How do they feel about it before, during, and after they interacted with this brand or the product or the service? So it's very simple. So how do they feel about it? But how do they feel about it is actually something that is artificially created, managed, and hopefully for good purpose, in order to make sure that that you come up with a good feeling. Coming out with a good feeling about the product and the brand and all of that, right? And so how do you do that? Like, how do you make sure that someone feels good about it? So first of all, what does it mean to feel good about, to have a good user experience? And again, I'll just limit that for the context of the conversation for digital products, and it can be devices, but something that you actually have to interact with. And so you make someone feel good about the interaction because it is easy to use. So it kind of feels almost intuitive. Someone wants to do something, and when they approach the system or the tool, it is easy to figure out what to do, even if you don't read the manual. So sometimes it's not possible and you need to read the manual, but generally in most systems, we try to make it as easy as possible, also accessible. So there are people with various abilities, and so accommodate for people with low vision, accommodate for people who are, have no vision, and so they need screen readers and so on. So there's an entire area there. So you want to make it easy to use, you want to make it efficient to use, so it's fast, it's kind of, you're not stuck there. You want to make it productive. So whatever you wanted to do, you finish it quickly. It's consistent. So your expectation of this interaction, it'll be the same every time you do it. So it's not like you just don't know where you land. And so overall, when I ask you about, Shay, what do you think about interacting with this system? You'd say, wow, it was great. It's really easy to, and that's what you typically use. It's easy to use and so on and so on. But how do you know what people want? So how will people know that it's easy to use? And that's where UX as a discipline is coming in. So I'll stop here for a moment if there's questions you want.
That makes sense. I mean, I think the fascinating thing for me is that I naively never actually thought about it in terms of services, for instance. Or things other than, I guess I knew in the abstract that you want to have a good, if I go up to a garage, and I thought about this recently, actually, in this context of it was very easy for me to drive in. I knew where to go. There's perfectly nice signs. Somebody was waiting for me. I got out. I didn't have to wait a long time. They told me just what I needed to know and not anything more. They gave me a place to sit down and have coffee and wait. They checked in on me and let me know how things are going, before I started getting antsy about whether. And I just recognized this beautiful experience. And it's so, for me, I guess when you are in the discipline, you maybe take some of that stuff for granted. You'll notice when you're a little bit grumpy about a piece of software, or you're grumpy about an experience and it doesn't feel right. But I guess I never really connected this to, clearly there's going to be a science around that, and there's going to be a discipline focused on that. So now I'm hooked. I want to hear more.
Right. So there is a history to it. UX did not exist. The UX as a UX did not really exist maybe 2 or 3 decades ago, but also many things we interact with did not exist. So, there were computers, but most people interacted them in an office context, very limited type of applications, maybe computer game, things like that. But increasingly, and especially after 2007, I'm curious if you can guess why 2007 is a really important day.
I'm guessing this is phones. I'm guessing this is when the cell phone, or maybe the iPhone.
The iPhone. So the iPhone came out, and with it, it completely revolutionized how we deal with computers, really. And now with AI, that is the next step, which we'll talk about quickly. But so there is a history, and before that, there was a whole domain that's called, human factors. So these people were scientists almost, and people who dealt with designing airline cockpits, things like that, where it was really important that you get it right. And even they often didn't get it right. But it involved a methodology. And then at the beginning, as software became more and more common, especially with Apple and its graphical user interface, people started to be able to directly manipulate the software. And so suddenly there was stuff to look at, not just text to look at. And that stuff, the way it looks, the way it moves, the way you deal with it, all of that was really requiring some thought. Because otherwise, traditionally, you had developers come in and they just put something together and then add more buttons and more, because no one actually went to talk with people about what really they need. And systems became more and more complicated. Anyone who remembers Microsoft Word, if you remember Microsoft Word 15 years ago or so, there were all these toolbars. If you wanted, you could fill your entire screen with many, many, many toolbars. And maybe you have a tiny space to write something. And look at it now, it's complete evolutionary change. So increasingly UX became, and UX practitioners became more and more focused on knowing the process, a repeatable process. It is agnostic to the industry almost that you want to do. So you can design for AgeTech. So I can design a system for people with dementia, or you can design a word processor or a dashboard of an electric car. But you'd go kind of through the same repeatable process. And that repeatable process gives some confidence to the business. So that comes now the business part, because it costs money. But there's confidence that if you follow these steps, ideally, then you're going to end up with a product or a service that people actually not only like to use, they want to use. So they want to use yours versus the competition. And that is really important, because what is the motivation for people to invest in UX? So it goes beyond making it look nice, eye candy. It's actually really strategically important to organizations to ensure that they get more and more market share and a good feeling of people about the brand.
So where now does the intersection, like for you and your thinking, where did the clear intersection with, besides the fact that some software is now using a lot of AI, where was that intersection with sort of responsible AI and UX for you?
Yeah. So as I was listening to, first of all, the courses, and so the certification, I decided to take the certification because I felt that I needed a level, first of all, the knowledge, but also a level of credibility that comes, I think, from actually knowing a little more than general knowledge from listening to a podcast, but actually really deeply learning it in the context of the coursework, which I found to be excellent. So as I was thinking about the work, I was also thinking about my work as UX, and I was trying to make the links between what I already do and what is proposed by the methodology of actually running AI audits and the components that go in it. And I could see suddenly direct links. So for example, there is a basic AI risk assessment that organizations can do, and BABL offers free to anyone, just a cheat sheet, which is wonderful. This is basically, you can go and do it yourself, kind of at least to get started. But the process that is involved in doing this risk assessment is very much a process that UX does anyway in design. And maybe I'll explain a little bit. It's important to understand that UX, in my opinion, is not only a connecting tissue between a product, a service, a brand, and the actual product, the interaction. So UX helps do this work nicely. It is also the connecting tissue in organizations between the various departments and stakeholders in an organization. So in other words, many times you'll actually find silos. You'll find the business people, find marketing, sales, engineering, and they definitely don't talk the same language. And many times they don't even talk with each other. They just kind of work in their silos, they have their own focus, and they try to come up with a product together. So many times there are gaps between what engineering wants, whether what product wants, just a lot of tensions. UX actually is able to be centrally positioned and talk with the various stakeholders, bring them together. So there's a variety of methodologies that are used to actually align stakeholders around the thinking. And when you think about, well, what is a risk assessment? And as in one of the podcasts, which by the way, I listen to it when I run many times, so I need to listen to it a few times. It's get a few people, get your team together and talk. You don't have to just talk about kind of follow the steps and just have a conversation to start unpacking what AI, what are you dealing with in terms of AI risk? So this is what UX does, is this bringing people together, helping people bring their own perspectives, then putting it all together in a way that allows an organization and stakeholders makes this decision. What are the priorities? What features should come out first? Or in the case of AI risk, in looking at the big picture, whose needs, whose risks are the highest, and so on and so on. That is how it got connected in my mind. It was perfect. UX only needs to add another dimension, really, really important dimension of helping the organization actually address risk and then ultimately governance of the products and so on in a way that is completely integrated in the way the business works anyway, if it has UX.
Yeah. Yeah. So the important, like if it has UX, and I mean, we often have to think about this when we're on the consulting side, not on the audit side, but on the consulting side where companies are trying to prepare for compliance, which will require things like risk assessments and impact assessments and other kinds of controls to mitigate those risks. And the question often is when and where and who is involved in that process. And so I would imagine, just listening to how you're describing this, for a company that has an AI system that's going to be packaged into a product, and that product, and they care about the user experience, and they're going through that process, let's say with you, it sounds like that's the perfect opportunity. You have the cross-functional team already. You're thinking about the way that people interact with your system. Why not start working through some of the risks and keeping tabs on what you might do, identify those risks, and think about ways that you can mitigate them eventually.
Mm-hmm.
Do you intend? So how are you intending to implement this? Like, I'm curious. So, and maybe we can start talking about some of your current work. Like, what are the ways you're envisioning potentially incorporating this into the work that you do? What kind of initiatives are you? I know you've got a lot of ideas about different ways to sort of incorporate this into your work. So, what's your current thinking on this?
Yeah. So as a consultant, and I think UX, by the way, to my colleagues or people who are in UX too, UX is considered actually a consultancy, even if it is an in-house team, because it's one of those shared resources, typically, that is actually working with across. So it works across the organization and then down with kind of the various levels there. So in a way, you consult, even if you work for a company, you consult a product owner, and so on. So it's kind of very much the same. As a independent consultant, there are two ways, the way I understand it now. One is maybe smaller, and that is to join a bigger team of experts who actually do audits or assurance kind of work. This one requires another type of multidisciplinary team that you can definitely talk more about, where UX is only a participant, and UX provides the user experience dimensions on looking at how it impacts the humans in the environment and so on. But then there are machine learning experts and ethicists and lawyers and so on and so on. And so a UX team cannot deal with it. And also many organizations may not even have these kind of skills around. So you'd bring, and also it's required by some regulations to bring an independent auditor to kind of look at the system. And by the way, in looking at the system, and something you stress a lot about, which is also UXy, is the iterative nature of it. In other words, it's not a one time and you're done, but like UX, you do it and it's a work in progress typically, and until you get to a level where you understand you're ready for an audit or you need to do an audit, but then you have to keep doing it to make sure, because it changes all the time. Same with UX, the technology changes, the need, so systems get updated, the user interfaces, we see it all the time, either over the air updates or whenever we do a software update, just new screens, new buttons, and so on and so on. So you constantly improve it. And so this iteration is important. So basically UX is a participant in assurance type of work. I have not done any of these yet, but I really look forward to it, because I think and why I'm so happy to have this conversation, Jay, is that I think, again, it may be a matter of awareness, that people who actually want to do an audit like that may not necessarily think to bring UX. Because as much as it sounds absurd sometimes, UX is not always considered.
Yep.
As an important participant. Obviously, you need machine learning. I mean, someone to look at the model and this, like, I cannot do it. But there are other parts. And so that's one aspect. And the other one is much more broader. And that is in the process of, let's say, in my domain that's relevant, and where UX actually plays a very important role, that goes beyond the user interface. And you wanted to actually know about the kind of a distinction, there's UI, or the user experience design. And then there's a kind of a broader discipline of UX, which is important to at least the way I look at it. If you just think about the UI, then your designer, the team there will be in charge of actually making sure that, let's say you need to present a disclaimer to a user that this is an AI system, this is what it's going to do, that is the kind of data that it's going to use, give you an option to opt out. Just a little bit like if you think about GDPR, right? We all now got used to every site we go to, there'll be a little pop-up with these are the cookies, and typically we just dismiss it. But we know that the GDPR regulation had a really significant impact, because beyond this click on the button, companies are really on the hook on making sure that the data security and whatever they do with our data is kind of, they need to really take care of it. Similarly with AI, the UI part will be how to make it easy for people to understand the implications and the risks of them interacting with an AI-driven system. When they give the voice, when they give the photos, the images, and so on, many people don't. That's another issue, what people really, how much they care about it or not, but at least you have to make it evident, right?
The communication of it, make it clear, understandable.
Yeah. And by the way, there are two parts to many user experience, a user interfaces. One is that you would see as an end user, but the other one is really important, is what people who administer the system get to see on what's called a kind of back end or back office, where then look at monumental amounts of information in aggregate of not just one user, but millions of people and all the day, right? And that requires another type of user interfaces to make it also effective, productive, and good, and so on and so on. So there's actually a lot of work in there. But that's a UI design part.
Yeah, but also relevant for AI risk, because those people at the back end are often have some responsibility around monitoring risk and what they have in terms of visibility, understandability, access, agency around that could all be relevant. So we're running long on time here, but I do want to talk quickly about some of this AgeTech stuff that you've been looking at. I want to understand kind of what is this technology. Like, I know there's probably a variety of different kinds of technology, but like, what is it? And how is AI potentially relevant? And then what's the UX angle on this?
Yeah, in a nutshell, AgeTech is a relatively recent term, but encompasses kind of a realization and a situation where there's a huge demographic change. Basically, the population is aging. Increasingly, there are more and more older people in the world, especially in the United States and other countries. There's one thing. The other thing is that people live longer, and so the span of their need of life as older adults is growing. So as in the past, life expectancy generally was not relatively, but maybe 65, 70, something like that. Now it's going, people are getting to 100. We're getting these things, and people live longer, but they're older. So there's a variety of then, and because of AI is providing a huge boost to suddenly a lot of solutions and a lot of AI activity around anything from helping people with things like basically exercise and kind of staying healthy longer. So eating well, nutrition, and so on and so on. But then there's another aspect of actually caregiving. There's a huge caregiving problem. So as there's more and more people who need care, there's less and less people who can actually provide care. So the hypothesis is, well, AI systems can help. For example, a fall detection is a huge problem. When elderly people fall, especially, that can be a death sentence. So the question can, let's put home prevention systems, a camera or something, sensors, and it will help deal with it. From our perspective, when thinking about it from an AI risk and so on, and what you hear many times from the clients, the people are elderly but they're in risk at falling, is they feel unease because they feel like they're surveilled. Essentially, there's a camera and some sensor. They look at you all the time, supposedly to alert someone when you fall, which is a very good thing. It helps with a really important it's a need. And maybe your children, caregivers, they want you to have it because from them it provides a safety kind of, we'll know our loved one is, if something happens, immediately someone will know. But the end user feels surveilled. They feel they are invaded, the privacy, and they don't want it, right? So there's sometimes a gap there where AI does a good thing, but it also surveils you. There are systems that provide another big problem there is loneliness. There's more and more, again, for demographic reasons and sociological issues, people who live alone, isolated, they have no one to talk to even. So these systems are companions. You talk to them, they talk back to you, they engage in conversations. Again, it is helpful. It shows, evidence shows, research shows it helps. But what is the price, right? And so it takes your voice, anything, any biometric information about you, plus all the information you share goes in, and you talk about your family, you talk about other people. So suddenly other people, private information often, would go into these things. And now we're in an age where maybe there are fewer providers of these kind of systems, but in the future, you can just buy on Amazon some kind of a cheap one, a cheap device. You don't know who the manufacturer is. You just know what the benefit is, but you have no idea that who gets all this sea of information. That's where, in my work, first of all, bringing awareness to the risks. And I think right now there's a dissonance because the fear of missing out, in my opinion, fear of missing out, the kind of rush to adopt these solutions is huge. And so how do you talk about risk? Hey, stop for a moment, think about the risks before you actually kind of provide all the information. Think about it. And then decide. You can say, fine, I don't care, do what you want. But also companies who do it, how to convince them that it is a good investment, right? And so
I think there's an obvious benefit of you're going to get better adoption if people trust. If there's some sort of trust that you build with the end user, that probably increases the user satisfaction as well. They feel more comfortable. They understand what their data is and is not being used for. It feels like hugely, especially in this situation where you know that there's going to be reticence on the part of the intended user. It feels like a competitive advantage, and eventually table stakes probably for operating in that industry. So I think we could probably talk forever about this stuff, but we do need to rein it in. So if people want to reach out to you and make use of your considerable experience here, what's the best method? Is it the website, LinkedIn? Do you have is there a name for your company?
Yeah, first of all, LinkedIn is great, and I'd love to talk with anyone, with you. So LinkedIn. My company is called Art, ART, and Tech. So Art, and the website is artandtech.com. But LinkedIn is probably the simplest way to find me. And yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for showing up. We'll be sure to put your information in the description below. If you're listening to this on a podcast on your long run, then thank you so much for listening. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd really love a like and subscribe. It helps us out a lot. And we'll catch you next time on Lunchtime BABLing.
Thank you.